A week ago, most people couldn't tell you who Homer was. Today, everyone's got a strong opinion about the Odyssey. So what actually changed? Did millions of people spend the last few days reading a 3,000-year-old epic poem? Or is something else going on? Something about how fast your brain can feel certain long before it actually understands anything? The Odyssey isn't a novel. It's a 12,000-line poem, originally sung out loud in a language nobody speaks anymore, built out of a version of storytelling older than most religions still practice today. Reading it properly, in translation, with any real attention, takes weeks. Understanding the history underneath it, the oral tradition, the politics of the era it was performed in, the centuries of scholars arguing over what half the lines even mean, takes years, sometimes an entire career. Nobody did that this week. What actually happened is simpler and honestly more interesting. Somebody watched a 20-minute video that summarized the plot, dropped a few impressive-sounding names, and delivered 3 clean, quotable conclusions. Picture the actual scene. Someone's on the train, half watching on their phone with one earbud in, nodding along. By the time they get off, they've got an opinion ready to go. Something about how the story's really about grief, or trauma, or leadership, framed with just enough confidence that nobody would think to ask where it came from. And here's the part worth sitting with. After watching something like that, something strange happens inside your head. Your brain stops asking, "Do I understand this?" and starts asking, "Does this feel familiar?" Those are not the same question, but they feel almost identical from the inside, and that's the whole trick. Once a name, a phrase, or an idea starts to feel familiar, your brain quietly treats familiarity as proof of understanding. You've heard Penelope, you've heard the sirens, you've heard rosy-fingered dawn, and your brain files all of it under known, even though nothing about the actual poem, its structure, its choices, its contradictions, ever got processed. Say those same names out loud at dinner a week later, with a bit of confidence in your voice, and nobody at the table will be able to tell the difference between you and someone who spent a semester translating it from the original Greek. This isn't a character flaw. It's just how recognition works. Your brain evolved to move fast, not to double-check itself. If something matches a pattern you've seen before, treating it as understood is usually a decent shortcut. It's just a shortcut that breaks completely the moment the subject gets complicated enough to matter. It shows up in places far more consequential than a dinner conversation about Greek poetry too. Someone sits in a work meeting, half listening while scrolling on their laptop, and catches a phrase, supply chain resilience, say, or market saturation. An hour later, in that same meeting, they repeat the phrase back with total confidence, building a whole opinion around it, and the room nods along. Nobody in that room is checking whether the phrase was actually understood or just recently heard. The vocabulary alone does most of the convincing, for everyone involved, including the person saying it. There's an old experiment worth knowing about. Ask someone if they understand how a bicycle works. Almost everyone says yes immediately, without even pausing to think about it. Then ask them to actually draw the chain, the gears, and how pedaling turns into forward motion. Most people can't do it. Ask the same thing about a zipper or the toilet in their own bathroom, and you'll get the same result: instant confidence, followed by a blank stare the second you ask for the actual mechanism. Not because bicycles or zippers are complicated, because I see this every day, and I understand this got quietly merged into the same feeling somewhere along the way. Researchers gave this a name: the illusion of explanatory depth. You feel like you understand something right up until someone asks you to actually explain it from scratch. And the gap between those two moments is where the whole illusion lives. That illusion used to be limited to bicycles and zippers and toilets. Small, physical, everyday things nobody really needed to explain out loud very often. The internet didn't invent this bug. It just gave it something new to run on. Abstract, complicated ideas, at a scale your brain was never built to handle, and a constant stream of chances to say them out loud in public. Someone scrolls past a headline about interest rates, picks up the phrase quantitative easing, and their brain quietly files, "I understand monetary policy," right next to, "I understand how my microwave works." Same shortcut, wildly different stakes. And once you notice this pattern in Homer, you start seeing it everywhere, in every direction you look. Somebody watches one explainer video on crypto over breakfast and suddenly has a firm, specific opinion on exactly where the entire market is headed by the end of the year. Somebody reads 3 tweets about a new AI model and speaks about the technology at a dinner party with the same confidence as someone who spent years actually building one, correcting people who work in the field. Somebody catches a 10-minute summary of a war on the other side of the planet and is certain they understand the politics of a region they'd never even heard of a month earlier, arguing about it in a comment section like they grew up there. Somebody sees one infographic about a food ingredient and starts warning their whole family away from it at dinner, citing a study they've never actually read. Somebody watches a short clip about melting ice and can suddenly explain, with total confidence, exactly what's going to happen to the climate in 30 years, down to specific numbers. Somebody reads one parenting post and is now gently correcting a stranger on how they're raising their own kid in a grocery store line. Different subject every single time. Same brain, running the exact same shortcut underneath in every single case. It's tempting to say the internet killed curiosity. That's not quite right, and it lets the real problem off the hook. The internet didn't kill curiosity. It just gave your brain something easier to reach for instead. The feeling of already understanding, without any of the work that used to be required to earn it. Curiosity requires your brain to sit in a specific, mildly uncomfortable state. I don't know yet. That state used to be unavoidable. If you wanted to know something, you had no choice but to sit in not knowing for a while, because there was no shortcut around it. You'd have to find a book, find someone who actually knew, wait, ask, get it wrong a few times first. Now there's a shortcut, standing right where curiosity used to be forced to start, and your brain, being efficient by design, takes it almost every time, without you ever consciously choosing to. So when someone watches a summary video, they're rarely watching it to actually explore the subject. They're watching it because their brain is doing exactly what it's built to do, hunting for the fastest possible way to feel resolved on a topic. 2 or 3 quotable lines, ready to be repeated the next time the subject comes up in conversation. That's not laziness. That's a very old system, built for a much simpler world, doing its job in an environment it was never designed for. Watch what happens the moment that same person is handed the actual thing. The full poem, the full study, the full 90-minute policy document instead of the 2-minute clip. Something in them resists it almost physically. The dense, unresolved, slower version doesn't feel like knowledge anymore. It feels like homework. And homework was never what they were looking for in the first place. They were looking for the feeling of being done. The strange part is what this does to the actual subject underneath. The Odyssey was built to sit with contradiction. A hero who's also a liar. A homecoming that takes 10 years and costs him everything. A story with no clean moral at the end. Compress that into 3 bullet points, and the contradiction is the first thing that disappears, because contradiction doesn't summarize well. What's left behind is smooth, confident, and much smaller than the thing it came from. And almost nobody notices the size difference, because the smaller version is the only one they ever actually held. Here's where it gets genuinely strange. It's not just that people repeat opinions they picked up somewhere. It's that the opinion, given enough time, stops feeling borrowed at all. It follows a pattern. roughly the same one every time. First, you download an opinion. You hear someone confident say something, a friend, a video, a headline, and it becomes the placeholder answer sitting in your head the next time the topic comes up. You didn't ask for it to move in permanently. It was just the first thing available, and your brain, needing an answer on the spot, grabbed it. Then you repeat it. Maybe in a conversation, maybe just rehearsing it in your own head before you say it out loud. Repetition is doing something quiet in the background here. Every time a thought gets said out loud, it gets a little more comfortable, a little more yours, even though nothing about its actual content has changed since the first time you heard it. Somewhere in there, you forget the source. You genuinely can't remember anymore if you read this somewhere, heard it from a friend at a party, or figured it out yourself one night thinking it through. The origin gets sanded off a little more every time it's repeated. And all that's left, eventually, is the conclusion, floating free with no label on it anymore. Once the source is gone, you feel ownership over it. It doesn't feel borrowed anymore. It feels like something you built with your own thinking. Your brain isn't lying to you on purpose here. It genuinely can't tell the difference anymore between a thought it constructed from scratch and a thought it simply adopted from somewhere else. And once it feels like yours, you defend it. Not because you did the work to earn the conclusion, but because it's sitting exactly where your own thinking would sit. And questioning it now feels less like fact-checking and more like questioning yourself. Download, repeat, forget the source, feel ownership, defend it. That's the whole cycle, start to finish, and by the end of it, there was never a single moment where the person consciously chose to fake anything. Nobody sat down and decided to pretend. The opinion just quietly moved in, unpacked its things, and started calling itself home. Watch it happen in real time over a few weeks with almost any news story. Week 1, someone hears a take from a podcast host they trust, a specific explanation for why something happened. Week 2, they mention it to a coworker, slightly more confidently, adding a detail that wasn't quite in the original. Week 3, they're explaining it to a family member as established fact, no longer attributing it to anyone, because by now, it doesn't feel like it came from anywhere. It feels like something they noticed themselves. By week 4, if someone pushes back with a different explanation, it doesn't feel like new information arriving. It feels like an attack on something they built. Nothing about the original take got any truer in that month. It just got repeated enough times to stop feeling borrowed. Here's the part that actually makes this worth thinking about. The people confidently repeating borrowed opinions online usually aren't lying. Almost none of them are trying to deceive anyone. Most of them genuinely believe the thought is theirs. That's stranger than if they were faking it on purpose. A liar knows where the line is. Someone running on borrowed certainty doesn't, because as far as their own mind can tell, there's no line to find. The forgetting from before wasn't a trick, it was real. The opinion feels earned because, from the inside, it is indistinguishable from one that actually was. Picture two people arguing online about that same war, that same crypto crash, that same parenting choice. Neither one thinks of themselves as repeating a script. Both of them feel completely sincerely like they're defending something they worked out for themselves. From the outside, it looks like two people trading talking points they downloaded from opposite influencers. From the inside, both of them would swear under oath that they got there on their own. This also explains something that looks like arrogance from the outside, but isn't quite that. People who've spent years genuinely studying something, a language, a field of history, a science, tend to talk about it carefully, full of qualifiers, comfortable saying, "It's complicated," or "I'm not sure, honestly." People running on a 20-minute summary tend to talk about the exact same subject with total, unshaking confidence, no hedging at all. That's not because the second group is more sure of themselves as people. It's that real depth shows you exactly how much you don't know yet. And a shallow pass at a subject can't show you anything, because it never took you far enough in to see the edges. You can only feel the size of an ocean once you're actually standing in it up to your neck. From the shore, all water looks the same depth. And this is why arguments about borrowed opinions get so heated so fast, faster than the actual stakes of the topic would ever justify on their own. When someone questions a belief a person built for themselves over years, it lands as a disagreement. Annoying maybe, but survivable. When someone questions a belief that's quietly propping up an entire identity with no real foundation underneath it, it lands completely differently, closer to a threat than a conversation. The reaction isn't proportional to the actual stakes of the topic. It's proportional to how much weight that borrowed idea is secretly holding up, and how far it might fall if it's wrong. You can actually watch the difference play out in how each type of person responds to being corrected. Show a real expert a piece of evidence that contradicts something they believed, and there's usually a pause, a genuine, let me think about that. Sometimes even something close to relief, because a real question just got a little closer to being answered. Show the same contradicting evidence to someone running on a borrowed conclusion, and the pause doesn't come. What comes instead is speed, a fast rebuttal, a change of subject, sometimes anger that seems oddly disproportionate to a simple correction. Not because the second person is more stubborn as a human being, because the first person has a foundation to stand on while they think it over, and the second person doesn't have anywhere solid to stand at all. Zoom out, and this stops being a story about Homer at all. It's a story about a brain that evolved to move fast in a world that stopped rewarding speed and started punishing it. For most of human history, feels true and is true lined up often enough that the shortcut worked fine. If it felt like a predator was nearby, moving fast mattered more than being right. A false alarm cost you a few wasted seconds, but hesitating cost you your life. Today, feeling certain and actually understanding something have quietly drifted apart, and almost nothing in daily life forces you to notice the gap. You can go your entire life sounding confident about 100 subjects you've never actually studied, and unless someone specifically asks you to explain one from scratch, nobody will ever know the difference, including you. That gap gets genuinely risky the moment it meets something that doesn't grade on a curve. You can hold a completely wrong, deeply confident opinion about a poem forever, and the poem will never push back. It just sits there on the shelf, patient, unbothered. A bridge will push back. A body will push back. A read on how a real crisis is actually unfolding, a real diagnosis, a real financial decision. All of it will push back, hard, and usually at the worst possible moment. Borrowed certainty feels identical to earned understanding, right up until it's tested against something that doesn't care how confident you sound while you're wrong. And there's a quieter risk sitting underneath that one. A person who's used to adopting conclusions without checking where they came from is, by definition, a person who'll adopt the next one the same way. Good information or bad, honest or engineered on purpose, it won't feel any different going in. That's exactly why a well-made piece of misinformation doesn't need to convince anyone through logic. It just needs to feel familiar fast enough, confident enough, and repeated often enough, and the same shortcut that made you sure about Homer will happily do the rest of the work on its own. Think about how quickly a health myth can spread through a family group chat. Someone posts a claim about a common ingredient causing some frightening effect, worded with just enough specific-sounding detail. A percentage, a study that's never actually linked, a phrase that sounds clinical. Within a day, 3 relatives have repeated it to their own friends, each one adding a little more certainty than the last, because by the 3rd retelling, nobody remembers it started as an unverified post. Nobody in that chain sat down and decided to spread something false on purpose. Every single person believed, sincerely, that they were passing along something they'd basically figured out or confirmed. That's not a story about gullible people. It's the exact same download, repeat, forget, defend cycle from before, just running on a subject with real consequences attached to it. That's not a flaw specific to any one group of people, one platform, or one generation. It's just what the shortcut looks like at scale, running quietly on millions of brains that all evolved to do the exact same thing, all at once. So maybe the question was never really about Homer. Maybe intelligence was never really about having the answers. Maybe it's about knowing exactly where your certainty came from and being willing to lose it the moment it turns out you never actually earned it in the first place. That's a much harder thing to do than watching a 20-minute video. But it might be the only real difference between reading the Odyssey and just knowing what it's about.